I know, right? So you go to this forum, you ask for help on how to prune your bonsai, and they tell you, oh, don't prune it, just thin it out. And you just left there wondering, is this something I should know? How do I thin out a bonsai? I'm Jelle, this is Growing Bonsai, and in this video I'll explain what does the term thinning out mean, how do you do it, and hands-on I'll go through 4 different trees on how to thin them out. I'll do it on this larch, I'll do it on a yew, I'll do it on a Jabuticaba, and what was the other tree that I was planning on thinning out? Yeah, a Chinese elm, of course. How do you thin out a bonsai? Let's go. First of all, if you look at this is an elm. It is nicely grown and there is a lot of foliage here that is actually quite full. One of the things that you can see here is that a branch has grown and it nice forks into 2, but here this branch is now crossing with that other branch. So one of the things that we need to do is to decide which of these branches do I find more important. Now this for me is the branch continuation, this is just a side branch, so I'm going to remove this. With that I've removed a substantial amount of foliage, but actually in the profile of the tree nothing has happened yet. What you can see here is that there's this little branch, and this little branch comes here of a bifurcation. So this is the side branch, this is the main branch, and this is coming up at that junction. That also needs to be removed. This in itself already opens up a lot of space. Here there's another one of these branches. Now does this mean that you have to remove all the vertical growing branches? No, of course not. You need to decide whether you need that branch to fill up a profile, and then maybe you want to remove the side branch. But by doing that, this foliage pad is now much more transparent to light, so that any branch that is growing underneath it also receives light. That way you get backbudding, and in springtime you can actually decide to prune back to buds that are more in the inside or reduce the length of this tree. And similarly here, let me remove a few leaves so you can see what I'm doing. What you can see here is there's a side branch here, there's a side branch, another side branch, and a third side branch, and a continuation. So I have way too many branches here. I want a little bit of spacing between individual branches, so I'm taking this one out, allowing more light to enter into this area and therefore in the crown of the tree. And I'm removing a few of these leaves here at the base of these branches. That way also, again, I encourage more light to get on the inside of the tree. If you don't do this and you just allow the tree to completely fill up, then no more sunlight comes on the inside and it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain the tree compact. Branches will extend, the foliage will all sit on the outside, and there's nothing to cut back to on the inside. And this thinning out, of course, you can also just use your fingers for the smaller branches and just gently pull out all these clusters. Because as the tree ages, more and more little clusters on the inside will occur, and you need to take all of these out to remove this stuff here, have it less congested. This is the midsummer sort of pruning that I do on my trees to really get transparency in the tree, aiding in next year's budding. This is not the same thing as pruning back. I actually have another video on pruning back in the middle of summer. And there I show you why you should stop pruning after the middle of summer. This is just opening up. And slowly this way the whole tree becomes a lot more translucent, I would say. I think that's a nice word. I've never heard anybody talk about translucence in bonsai, have you? Now if you like learning bonsai from my videos, then maybe if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, leave me a like, leave me a comment. I'd love to know your thoughts, and it helps YouTube to recognize you like this video. Now, the question of course is, can you only thin out deciduous trees? And in fact, no. You do thin out pines, as you can see in an earlier video that I did on pruning pines. But also if you take a larch or even a yew, you can thin them in a similar manner. If you take this little yew, for instance, this is actually the one that I used for the €50 bonsai challenge a few years ago. What you see here, there's a massive congestion in the top, there's a congestion here. This is all very, very happy backbudding, but it is way too much. I can't build a tree with this. So I'm going to have to thin out this top as well. And you do that here in the top by just looking at where all these little side branches come from. And then you see that here is a main branch. This is the original main branch going to the left. And there's this little side branch at the base. I'm removing that. Just above it is another one. I'm removing that as well, because it needs a little bit of space. Then here, this looks like a sprout going up, that's okay. But then there's one too many here in the back. And here I also have to look. There's this side branch, but there also is a side branch below it. Let's remove that. In the back there's this side branch. In fact, for the top I don't need a continuation. And here in the back you see there's a whole plethora of branches as well. I'm going to keep this one. I'm going to keep one in the top. This is actually better positioned than that one. I'm removing that one as well. This way it is now completely cleaned up. And then if I look here at this whole lump, we are basically faced with a similar cluttering, right? This is very nice, a side branch, but I don't need two side branches on the same spot. Then this one goes to the left, this one comes to the top, so I'm removing this one. Because here I have one going to the top, and this is the actual original continuation. I'm going to leave that in place. And then similarly to the leaf plucking, here I can do needle plucking. And with the U, this is actually really important. Because if you remove the needles, then you stimulate new buds to be formed on the branch. So a bare U branch will more easily create buds than one with needles. Removing this will now trigger buds all along. This is an old needle, let's remove this. And here I can also remove some of these. Now I get new buds here. We can basically systematically repeat this process throughout the tree. So this can be a fairly quick process. You don't have to really overthink it, particularly in species like the yew that really happily back buds where you want it, when you want it. This is of course a balance between how much do you remove and how much do you leave, because you don't want to pluck it so empty that it doesn't have any power to pick up. And just like that, this is also thinned out and could in theory now be completely rewired, and yeah, is ready to go for the rest of the season. And not many people know this, but you can also partially defoliate a larch, and particularly when they get really dense in summer, it is very helpful to ensure that the inner buds stay viable. Now I'm just going to do it on a few branches. I'm not going to thin this out completely because it is still quite open. I've been pruning it well this summer, but here it is starting to get congested. Now, and basically what I do when I defoliate these, I'm just taking one of those rosettes and I'm taking the lower needles and I gently pull. Then you're holding just a few needles. And I do that and I always try to get the lower needles of the rosette. And you do that all around, and particularly on one side, the sun side. So the inside I leave most of the needles, but the ones that are hanging down on the front or on the sun side, you can gently pull out. Do it gently and don't grab too many, otherwise you pull off the whole bud. But this way you reduce the amount of foliage that on the one hand will weaken the buds that are connected to it, and on the other hand it allows for more light to penetrate the inside, and therefore the tree will keep the buds on the inside alive longer. In some cases, if I do this, I even get the inner buds to pop and start growing, which is a nice added benefit, because then you have healthy young growth on the inside of your branch as well. Right, so I've pulled up my Jabuticaba again. This is a Brazilian grape, and the nice thing about this tree is that it will grow flowers here on the trunk. Not for me though, it hasn't done it yet, but I am sure it will. And the leaves are nice and big. So I can show you exactly what I mean when I mean thinning out the foliage. To be honest, the profile of this tree is pretty much like I want to have it. This is about the size that I want. I don't want this tree to grow any further. I just want to keep it in the structure, and for this I need to be able to prune back, otherwise you prune back to empty stumps. Now you can see it grows here nice on the ends of the branches. I actually need to fertilize it a little bit, but on the inside not a lot is happening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at all these branches and say I'm just going to leave 2 to 4 leaves everywhere at the end. This is a little bit much for most species, but for Jabuticaba in the middle of summer it's not a problem, because there's going to be lots and lots of growth until it is winter. Here you see a little side branch, basically bifurcation, and just by removing the leaves here at the base of the bifurcation, I'm actually not removing any structure, I'm just creating lots of light. Here there's now 4 leaves, but it's still quite a lot, right? I can just remove one from one side and one from the other side. Now this works quite well, except for when you pull off the side shoot. I should stop talking and working at the same time. Doing this consistently throughout your tree will allow airflow, it will allow light, and in general your tree will look less like a bush and more like a tree, because that's the other thing. Normally if you look at a big tree, they are open on the inside. They don't have a lot of foliage on the inside. So you can help create this image of an older tree by opening up, thinning out the foliage a little bit on the inside. All done, thinning it out. I do hope that on the video you can actually see that this was thinned out, but you can see it is quite open and translucent. So in summary, thinning out your bonsai has a few reasons. One reason is to make sure there's sunlight on the inside, aiding in retaining buds and smaller branches on the inside, and therefore next year you have new growth on the inside, but you can also prune back to inner buds next year. Secondly, next to that, it weakens this year's growth and therefore it doesn't fatten up all that much. And thirdly, it makes your tree look better like a bonsai, because a ball of green that you can't look into doesn't really look like a tree. It is more a shrub or topiary. So those are good reasons why in summer you can thin out your tree. There's still plenty of light, so the trees still get lots and lots of light for photosynthesis. And sometimes you get a tiny little spurt of growth, but that's not all that bad. It's not the same as a massive prune back, because that, of course, you have already done in July. This tree has now been completely thinned out. I haven't pruned the profile pretty much anything. It has just opened up a lot. I hope that you can tell from this image that it is indeed a lot more open, and now sunlight can penetrate the inside, more new buds can set for next year, and in fact in winter there will be little new side branches that I can prune back to if I need to. In this case I don't need to yet, because it is not too big yet. It can grow a little bit bigger. This was Jelle. But before you go, if you want to know what my latest video is, or if you are just keen on seeing more of that gorgeous elm. And with that we're all done here. This was Jelle, growing bonsai, thinning out bonsai in summer. Now you know it. You don't have to ask on a 4 anymore. Keep growing bonsai. See you next time.